And good evening and welcome. It is the Kaufman Corner edition. Prospect edition is where we're at right now. We're going to talk some baseball prospects with Jeffrey Paternostro from Baseball Prospectus, their lead prospect writer. We'll get into who the Royals' top prospect is, how deep is the system, if at all. Is there a sleeper flying under the radar? What do the Royals need to do differently? Are they developing pitching any differently? Why aren't they more successful with international players? We break it all down with one of the best of the business. It's coming up right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. Welcome to our prospect editions. We begin to break down the Kansas City Royals farm system. Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro with you. As we are bringing in the experts, Rany, before we bring in Jeffrey, I just real quick, how do you think this is going to go? What do you think we're going to hear? Boy, the system's loaded. It's better than most people think. Or, good Lord, I don't even know how they're going to field minor league teams this year. What are you expecting?
I'm expecting that Jeffrey will do his best to disappoint us, but it won't
We're on
work.
a roll between Jeff Passan coming on and basically dumping on where things were going. Joe Sheehan, I mean, it'd be par for the course, would it not?
It would, but you know what? Nothing is going to bring me down today, Soren. This is the one day of the year. I'm armed with a smile to accompany the jersey. And yes, before you ask, it has been washed. And also, if you think it's weird that I'm wearing a Chiefs jersey on a Royals podcast, keep in mind that as I do every time the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, I also wore this to work today and saw all of my patients in my Chiefs jersey. So, that's not even the Royals farm system can bring me down today. Well, we'll find out just how depressing it is.
That is that's borderline frightening. If I came into you, see my doctor and he's wearing a jersey, I might just turn around and walk out. Dude.
I will say the new patients were may have been a little taken aback. My most of my established patients know where I stand on this.
Okay, because if you know. I was just going to say you're a hell of a doctor if they're still coming. It speaks to your ability as a dermatologist there. So
that's is that like the opposite of a backhanded compliment? I think it's like it's a friendly insult or something along those lines. Yeah.
Well, I joined you. This is my go-to game day attire. The Dallas Texans hoodie from when they celebrated 50 years as a franchise back in, I think, 2012 it was. Maybe it was 2010. 1960 was formed. 2010, and I love it. It's my favorite because it's old school. So I decided, all right, since you've been doing it for like a month and a half now, I would match you with some gear. So yes, make no mistake about it. If you listen to some of my other podcasts, it is Kaufman Corner, and we are proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Let's get to it. Let's welcome our guest, Jeffrey Paternostro, joins us, lead prospect writer for Baseball Prospectus. Jeffrey, how are you, sir?
Good. I have a 3-year-old, as I mentioned to you in the lead up to this. So basically between the months of October, November, December, January, and February, I'm either coming down with something, sick, or getting over something. And I'm currently getting over something. So the audio is going to be a little more Leonard Cohen than my usual.
Okay, I like it. That's strong. That's well done. Let's just dive right in. How good is this system? Is it making any progress? What's your first reaction? You look at
it's one of the bottom 5 systems in baseball. I forget exactly where we rank them on the org rankings that went up last week or 2 weeks ago now, but around there. They are not one of like, they're not the Angels. We'll start with that, I guess. That's something you can hang your hat on. And to sort of paraphrase Tolstoy, like every good system is kind of like the Orioles, or all like, and every bad system is kind of bad in its own way. And the Royals are at least bad in an interesting way to me. They were actually, there's one system every year that like actually gives me a lot of trouble in like the ranking process. And the Royals were that system this year because I didn't exactly know what to do with them. So just a little insight into how the sausage is made. We use essentially 3-year projected peak OFP. So, which is a 75th percentile outcome for us. So we're like, what will the best 3 years of this player's career look like? And we want to capture, impact talent whenever possible. The Royals do not have a lot of those players, which is part of the problem. And they're all kind of the same player, especially on the position player side. And obviously they just signed Adam Frazier, and they're all kind of versions of Adam Frazier, like peak Adam Frazier, bench career Adam Frazier. Like it just, but it's that kind of like hit tool first, can kind of play a bunch of positions. That's not shortstop, may not really impact the ball enough. And they're inevitably, to an extent, major years. Michael Garcia is a good example of this player type. Somehow he ends up playing third base, which is not ideal. But this is basically the kind of prospect on the position player side. Both prep and college, although they have signed more college bats out of the draft than prep recently. And then you go to the pitching side, and you look back at the 2021 draft class where they went heavily prep in the early rounds and like spread the bonus around. But these were all, notable prep prospects. And you check in on them 2 years later, which again, it's a reasonable point to check in. And really none of them have taken a step forward as pitchers, or even gotten to, a few of them, I think they all got to high A last year. And again, they were projects. We can get into them individually in a bit. But there's just not a ton of confidence from me that they're going to, turn Frank Mazzucato into a mid-rotation starter, given what they have done in pitching development. And you look at the last time they invested heavily in pitching, obviously it was the college arm class led by Brady Singer. And look, Brady Singer made it to the majors. Chris Bubich made it to the majors. Daniel Lynch made it to the majors. Jackson Kovar made it to the majors. They all made it to the majors. And Singer had a nice season in there. Bubich has been okay at times. But even with those guys, you can't look and see where they are improving these pitchers. And that's really the name of the game now, is you have to be able to take a pitching prospect with what we would call traits, right? Major league traits. And Frank Mazzucato is a great example of that. When we get into him, we can talk about it in more detail. And you've got to turn them into Grayson Rodriguez, right? Or that endless litany of Dodgers or Guardians pitchers. And look, the Royals don't have to be that good, but they're not even at like the Twins level at this point. And that's the problem. Like we can go over their draft picks from recent years, and I'll say, I like that pick. I like that pick. I like that pick. But there needs to be progress throughout the minors. And that just has been the main issue here, is they have not developed anyone where I can say this prospect is significantly better than they were when they were drafted, or when they were, 2 years ago in A-ball or things like that. So, you don't want to weight that too much, because the talent is the talent. But again, it's got to be it really has to be a synthesis between your amateur draft or your amateur player evaluation and your player development. And that does not seem to be really working for the Royals in recent years in any kind of concert.
Well, Soren, I stand corrected, because
Thanks,
I think he did harsh my buzz. Even my Chiefs championship buzz has been wounded by that soliloquy. Nothing you said is surprising, even if it is depressing. But I guess we're both looking for some sort of glimmer of hope here, and one of the glimmers that we've been holding on to is that the Royals are finally belatedly making changes on the player development side, as well as, I guess, the draft. I mean, they brought in Brian Bridges to run the draft. They've been hiring people from outside the organization, either from other organizations or sometimes even from some of the pitching labs that are out there over the off season. Do you get the sense that the Royals are one, aware of the problem, and two, actually being proactive about trying to fix the problem?
I think they are at least bringing new voices into the room, which is, I think, one of the keys here. They've essentially had the same front office for, really since Dayton Moore was hired, right? You can talk about, when you bring in his tenant, you're expecting similar things, kind of what we're seeing with Chris Getz in Chicago as well. But he is starting to bring in new voices to the room. Teams, I like Adam Frazier, fine. Teams that, teams that are a little more progressive, right? Brian Bridges comes from the Giants. So teams with a better reputation. The thing is, this stuff takes time. It took time for the Dodgers. It took time for the Orioles. It took time. I mean, Cleveland's been good at this for a while. The Yankees have been good at this for a while. But even the Yankees have kind of tweaked some things in recent years as well. It just, you can push all the right buttons now with hiring, and it might be 3 to 4 years before you see actual major league impact from that. You got to do it. You got to start the process. And, you might get a guy here or there, right? The Dodgers got Tony Gonsolin pretty quickly. But to actually turn yourself into, honestly, even an average player development system and an average, you can phrase a bunch of ways, whatever you want to call it, R&D, ops, really getting rid of the silos and getting everyone working towards a common goal in terms of player acquisition and player development, and then seeing the fruits of it. It just takes a number of years. This is going to be the first draft class of the new regime, right? It'll be the first year that the new player development staff has to work. They're still trying to find out where the copier is at this point, right? So this stuff does take time. I guess it can't be worse, right?
Probably not.
No,
although never say never. We're fans of the Buddy Bell dictum here that you never say it can't get worse.
Yeah, my friend Nate Buchanan, who covered the Royals, said would you say at least it can't get worse? And Buddy Bell turned to him and said, Nate, it can always get worse. So we live by that after all these 100-loss seasons that have been piled up around 3 to 5, depending upon how you want to look at it. Good seasons that were there in the middle. We'll take our championship. We're not giving it back. Our AL crown as well. We're not giving those back. What do they need to do? Like where are they missing? You said, you can look at it and say good pick. And I have this debate with a lot of other people, whether it's, football or basketball. Like, Asa Lacy, everybody thought he was good. I know.
Sure. Yep.
I don't care, because your job is not to get, Jeffrey to agree and write nice things in Baseball Prospectus, or me on my talk show, or here on this podcast to go, yeah, that's the best guy out there. You're in the get it right business. That's why you make 7-figure salaries. And it doesn't matter if the consensus agrees with you. All that matters is that you select the right guy. You see it more as a problem of who they're drafting or how they're developing?
It's not specifically who they're drafting, but it's also who they're drafting. And I'll explain. When you're drafting someone like Frank Mozgov, like Asa Lacy, he got hurt and he stopped throwing strikes. That happens. Like pitchers, it happens. You can miss on a high level top pick college pitcher. That's one example. There's patterns here, right? When you're drafting Frank Mozzicato, and I was living 20 minutes from Frank Mozzicato's high school field, East Catholic High. So I saw him a lot that draft year. And he's a young for his class, and Rany knows a lot about what young for your class preps mean. He was a 17-year-old prep that did not have a ton of showcase experience, in part because of the 2020 pandemic, basically canceling all of those things. He was a pop-up velocity arm, and I went and saw him, and he had feel for spin that you cannot teach. And you see that, and you see the velocity, you see the projectable frame, you see the big long arm action and delivery, and you look at it and you're like, okay, here are the 4 things I can fix when I take him. I can shorten the arm action. I can tweak his slot a little bit, but maybe give him a changeover, maybe just have him throw the curveball a lot, and try to get him in a pro strength and conditioning program to add a couple ticks and things like that. You just go through your list and you have a plan, and you know what your player development people are good at. And look, I thought taking him where they took him was very aggressive. I had him as a second rounder. I figured someone would take him late in the first, maybe as a slight cut. But for the bonus he got, it was fine. The problem is, we're 2 years on now from that, and they've tweaked his delivery. He can no longer repeat his arm action on his fastball. If anything, I think they've lengthened it, which is really not what you wanted to do there. He still has the feel for the curve, but there's knock-on effects here where because he's still not quite right with his mechanics, the curves, it's still plus, but it looked like it was going to be plus plus. Like he was going to get there because it was just a monster at that age in high school. And he walked 7 or 8 per 9, I think, this year in A ball. And you can see it, like it still flashes, but that's a guy you got to have a plan for. That's not Brady Singer, where Brady Singer is just going to get to the majors. He was the Friday night starter at Florida, like barring, again, Asa Lacy level injuries and command regression. Like that guy's just going to get there. If you're taking Frank, their 9th overall pick, and yeah, they gave him under slot, but that's an opportunity cost when you're doing that. You have to have a plan. You can't just take him and assume, 2 years from now, we'll be throwing 93 because look at him. You got to do stuff. And the stuff they've done hasn't really worked. This is true of, Caderna's not really done much either. I kind of like what I saw from Panzini this year on video, but also the production was the production there too. You can't exactly.
Right.
He was the guy I kind of wanted to put a little bit of a stamp on, but it's just like you can't be doing that in the low minors and get me to completely buy in, because at some point the production does matter. And then like Kevin Cross, again, I did video on him after the draft last year. I talked to people that loved him at that pick in the draft, and he looked great. And again, maybe not the biggest upside in the world, but a guy's gonna be above average hit, above average power, play center field, some left on left issues, but again, you don't see great lefty stuff in college, like stuff to work with. And then he just comes out and I think slugs under 400 in high A, and not a good place to hit, let's be honest. But it's just got to be, for a college bat like that was a major college performer, to go backwards. Like, I imagine he has to be hurt. I couldn't run down anything specific, and he didn't spend a ton of time on the IL. So you kind of just say, okay, and this was my process when I was doing the list, that he, in the near past, has shown me like above average major league tools. I still have to ride with him on this list because it's in there somewhere. But that's the thing, you go to like Brady Singer, and you go to like Jackson Kovar, and you go to like Asa Lacy. When guys get a little off the tracks, even the more advanced college bats or college pitchers, they've not been able to get them back on it, right? That's the other thing too, is that even for the guys that have been fairly smooth paths to the majors, all in all, like, they don't really maximize them. I know Brady Singer finally did get a changeup, and his command's been okay at times. And look, he had Tommy John surgery. This, again, is a thing that happens when you're taking pitchers in college or the prep ranks. It's just a fact of life. You're probably going to lose them for 12 to 18 months at some point. But there's no real, like, and I looked at this list and I was doing this list, getting back to it, it was very difficult for me to put these guys in an order, because I try not to do strict pref, like personal pref. I try to take all the information I have from staff, from the data, from talking to scouts, from the production, from my own video looks, and synthesize it into, what we like. The phrase we like to use is defensible arguments, right? You have to be able to, it's got to be a defensible argument. You have to make a cohesive argument that this player is going to be better than this player. And I was staring at this list, and I'm like, I kind of want to put Javier Vaz number 2. And I just have no reason for it. He's a day 3 Vanderbilt bat. But that was the kind of stuff I was working through when I was doing the Royals list, because they have such a distinct type. And within that type, like, I liked Javier Vaz's bat to ball skills the best. But again, he's also a day 3 Vanderbilt bat that, he hit pretty well this year for the levels he was at. They started playing him in left field towards the end of the season, because that's also a thing they like to do with these players that are mostly second basemen coming up, because they can't play them all in the infield, because they keep signing Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson and whoever else too. But like I said, they really have a type. But it's just difficult for me to say when I don't have like a clear impact talent option outside of Blake Mitchell, who's also a prep catcher, which is a problem class of prospects. Like, honestly, MJ Melendez has been one of the better prep catcher outcomes in recent drafts, and he's a left fielder. And he's not like Neil Walker or Will Myers, who are also prep catchers either. But it's just really hard to come up with these like tiers, because they're all kind of the same guy in a lot of cases. You got prep arms with certain issues. You get into the next 10, there's like some interesting college arms. Actually, this is a weirdly deep system for a bottom tier one, but I think most of those pitchers are going to be relievers or swingman or multi-inning guys for the most part. Look, it's nice to have all of them, and odds are somebody will turn into a decent back-end starter out of that group. But again, it's, look, great. You signed Bobby Witt Jr. into perpetuity. You should do that. And they did it. You have that locked up, but you need to find 3 to 4 more impact bats to put around him sometime in the next 14, or I guess 6 to 14 years, however long it is, 8 to 14 years. And there's not, I can't even say they're not selecting those players. Blake Mitchell is that player. Gavin Cross kind of looked like that player last year, but it's all of a sudden you look at it and you do wonder, like, they can produce the 2-win infielders, the Michael Garcias, I guess Adalberto Mondesi was this to an extent too. Nick Lofton's going to be that guy. They have him, but again, Bobby Witt Jr. is eventually going to learn to walk just because they're not going to pitch to him.
Fair enough. Yes, I'm even more depressed now because everything you just said about Gavin Cross, and yet, spoiler alert for those who don't have the Baseball Prospectus's top 10 list for the Royals. Gavin Cross is the third best.
Again, that's because he was the most recent. Like, look, Nick Lofton had a nice season, and they have signed 3 people to block Nick Lofton for some reason, as well in that. And I like Nick Lofton. I actually kind of like Nick Lofton. So there's an old Jarrett Seidler, who's another senior writer at the site, and I have made this joke for a number of years. You'll be sitting behind home plate talking to scouts, and they'll be like, point out somebody. This was originally Tyler Wade was the first person we did this with. And so how long ago it was, and also kind of where I'm going with this. And it'll be just like, you'll watch him for a few games, and it's just, he can run. He's kind of got sneaky pop. The approach is okay. He can play shortstop. He's got the foot speed for a bunch of other positions. You come away after watching him 3, 4, 5, 6 games, talking to scouts about him. What do you think of Tyler Wade? It's like, oh, I love him. He can really help a major league team. What are you writing him up as? 45. Yeah. And that's like the thing with Nick Lofton, really neat player, but he's going to hit 7th for you. And he really probably shouldn't even be, maybe more of a 4 to 5 day a week guy in that role too. And again, he's number 2. And again, some of that's proximity. I can just look at him and be like, okay, that's a major leaguer, which is even difficult to say about Gavin Cross after his 2023 season. But, and again, Javier Vaz is that type of player as well. He had a better season where it's, signs pointing up. Peyton Wilson is that guy. Caden Wallace is kind of that guy, even though he's a third baseman. I mean, they might just move him to second at some point too. All these guys will end up playing left field in the minors. It's wild to me. Like, they're playing Javier Vaz in left field. He was really bad there. He played the outfield. He's fast enough. He'll be fine. But just like, why are you doing that with Javier Vaz? I guess you're playing Michael Garcia at third base. And I guess that Bobby Witt Jr. is just your shortstop in perpetuity. And they've got, Michael Massey is still around, I assume, probably too, playing second. And again, you just signed Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson, who can play all of those positions as well. It's just a very weird roster building approach, really up and down.
Well, maybe let's talk about the one guy that might actually have the star potential, because even he is obviously an extremely polarizing, draft pick, at least in what was a very deep 2023 draft. You take the 8th pick, I believe it was, and you take a high school catcher. And, we've discussed on the show a lot about just the failure rate of high school catchers. We know just how bad this is in an aggregate setting. But can you tell us, it sounds to me like you do at least put Blake Mitchell in a different category, and just in terms of the upside is actually there for this guy to be an impact major leaguer. What is your impression of him as a player?
So I think he can be above average hit, above average power. And I think that'll play. And he's still for now pretty athletic in a way that will likely at some point get ground out of him just through the travails of minor league catching and eventually major league catching if he stays behind the plate. And look, he's got a chance to stay behind the plate, but we've said that about every single prep catcher drafted for, I guess we didn't really say it about Tyler Soderstrom, but pretty much every high-ranking prep catcher for a number of years. It's a nice swing. It's just easy, pretty lefty power. He hits the ball pretty hard without sacrificing a ton of hit tool because the bat's in the zone. It's twitchy. It's kind of like fast twitch in a way you don't always get with catching prospects behind the plate. He can throw. Fine, the arm's fine, and that means if he moves, he can move to third base or right field. He doesn't have to move to first over the long haul if that's something that ends up happening. I don't know how the catcher defense is going to develop. I'll have a better idea next year in a pro setting. We'll have more data on that. We'll have a better idea of what the Major League Baseball catcher role is going to look like, I think, in the coming years as well. Because one of the things, I can't write this, I can allude to it. If the auto zone comes to Major League Baseball, even in a challenge system, how we evaluate catchers is going to change a lot, and it's going to change very quickly. And I suspect teams are going to start doing weird things. And maybe that's just you catch Blake Mitchell, even if he's like a below average framer, because that doesn't matter as much anymore. Right. Maybe the Rays do something really weird and put like, I don't know, they're capable of putting basically anybody back there. Like there's a limit, right?
Kyle Schwarber back behind the plate.
Yeah, there's a limit. Like your pitchers will mutiny at a certain point if they don't think they can throw a curveball in the dirt. But yeah, you can do, Yandy Diaz or something behind catcher or whatever. You can do weird stuff there. I think it will just kind of maybe open the sort of lower limit of what kind of defense teams will take back there. But that will have the same effect of also raising the offensive bar for catcher too, probably in some ways. So it's a balancing act. This is stuff going through my head while I'm trying to decide how to write up Blake Mitchell, but it's not really germane to it. I can tell you he's a catcher for now. He's got the basic like athletic tools from behind the plate. Framing is a teachable skill. The Royals have not been great at teaching it, as with the MJ Melenda. And they don't. You got to look at it and be like, do they value catcher framing when they're keeping MJ Melendez behind the plate basically for the entire minor league career, where Sal Perez has been their catcher for a decade at this point. And with Sal Perez, you can argue there's a trade-off, right? He hits for power. He's got a very good arm, and he gets very good marks for the game calling and pitcher staff management stuff, which is important, but does not go into our catcher defensive framing metric, obviously. So that stuff does matter. But again, with something like Blake Mitchell, I would have taken one of the remaining college bats there. This is a very deep college bat class, but I get it. Like this was kind of a unique player in this draft class, unique prospect in this draft class. But again, it just comes back to, do I trust the Royals to develop him as a hitter? Because that still has to happen too, while he's trying to learn, how to be a professional catcher. I don't know. Again, it's one of those guys where you can actually look at it and be like, okay, there's some this guy can hit third in your major league lineup as a catcher someday, potential. And that's why he was a fairly easy pick for number one and made our top 101 as well. And the feedback I've gotten from the industry on him has been like, yeah, I really liked, again, people disagree on whether he's a catcher long-term, because of course they do. He's a high school catcher, but there was general good vibes about the bat in general. But, the refrain I got was, I don't know if the Royals can develop him. And I heard that with Mazzucato too. Gavin Cross, not so much. And here we are anyway, 12 months later.
Yeah. It still hasn't developed.
Yeah. Well, on the subject of development, I'll highlight something Alex said. He said there's too much emphasis being put on the first round picks being disappointments in the Royals farm system. Yeah, because no second, third, fourth, no other round ever makes it either. Right? Like that's the thing. And if you're not hitting anywhere, right? I get it. If you said it very well, Jeffrey, they have a type. And if you're consistently missing because of your type, you go beyond the first round. You should back ass into, somebody, that Lenny Dykstra,
sure.
He's just tough and a gamer, and he's going to do whatever it takes on his own to figure it out and get there. They don't. They don't have anybody come anywhere. No. And add on top of that, Latin America might not exist in their world. They haven't had anything come out of Latin America since Salvi. What was the big trio?
Jordano Ventura and Kelvin Herrera.
Those three, in their first year, and since then, nothing. What's the problem in Latin America? That's why I point back to it's a development.
Yeah, problem. It's a player acquisition problem, right? Maybe it's evaluation, maybe they're evaluating correctly but looking for the wrong things, right? So the thing about the first round picks is the reason this system is so bad is because the first round picks are not hitting, and these are high first round picks because the Royals draft high every year. and you have to get major. Like when you miss on that, even if you're moving money around, which they did with Mazzucato, less with Cross and Mitchell, that is such a large amount of the draft capital you have for a given season. I'll go all the way back to I wasn't even at Baseball Prospectus yet for this, I don't think. The year they took Hunter Dozier so they could get Sean Manaea in the second round. And I just remember thinking about it, and I was writing about prospects at the time. And I everyone kind of knew what they were doing. And Manaea was probably going to get there because of like the velocity fluctuations and the injury issues that are already kind of present. I just remember like, okay, but like Dozier was still going to be there. Like, why didn't you take Manaea first? Like it doesn't like it was just like a process because like teams do these floats, right? All the time. They'll take a cut at the first round or a high first round pick with a plan to, float a difficult to sign prep or something for their second round pick. This happens a bunch. The Astros did it with Correa and McCullers. I think it's probably the most famous and the highest end outcome out of it as well. But it just doesn't seem to be a coherent process. And when you miss on those first round picks, like, you've got guys, then so Mazzucato was 9th. I feel like Cross was 10th or 12th, I think.
Cross was also 9th.
Cross was also 9th. So we're talking 9, 9, and 8 here. So 3 top 10 picks in, 3 pretty good drafts, where you should be getting.
Well, then throw an Asa Lacy in there, who was 4th.
Yeah, throwing Asa Lacy was like 4th, wasn't he? 4th or 5th. When you the thing is like I can only tell you what the outputs are here, right? When you miss on all those picks, and I don't have any of them as top 101 level prospects, however many years out from the draft we are, other than Mitchell, like that's just gonna make your system look worse. That's just the reality of it. And yes, the Dodgers don't always hit on their first round picks. The Dodgers will do weird things in the draft. The Dodgers, because they have so much confidence in their player development system, and because they have a major league roster that consistently wins 100 games every year, they can take weird swings. They can go for, high end upside plays. If you look what they did with the Michael Busch trade with the White Sox, right? Like Michael Busch had been a top 101 guy for us, I think like 3 of the last 4 years or 4 of the last 5 years. He's a major league ready bat. He was ranked significantly higher on their list than the 2 prospects they sent back. But the Dodgers don't have a role for Michael Busch. Like Michael Busch will be a nice player for the White Sox. So bat in the middle of that lineup, he'll play first base, I guess, which, okay, fine. It's the White Sox. I can't. It is what it is. But, the Dodgers were never going to really have a role for him. And look, they might not get anything out of the trade pieces, but they're swings, right? There's a chance that either or both those guys are top 50 prospects in baseball sometime. It's like 10%. But those are the guys that can crack the Dodgers 26-man roster at this point. It's not really Michael Busch.
We're proudly brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your parking lot. Get it restriped. Today, brightly striped lots, cut down on accidents, keep you focused on your business. Keep your parking lot as safe as possible. Go to GAN Asphalt and Concrete at GANasphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lots. Rany, sorry to
no, I was just going to say, trying to find some sort of positivity to talk about here. You did talk about like the depth of the system and that, and especially, it did seem like last year the Royals maybe, for the first time in a while had at least some interesting arms, guys who were mid-round picks, who seemed to at least, statistically, which obviously doesn't mean that much, but I'd rather guys produce in the low minors than not, had surprisingly good seasons. I mean, a guy like Mason Barnett, who, coming, was a 3rd round pick and seemed to like a bit of a reach. And actually, I think it was their minor league pitcher of the year, which says something about the organization, but still made it to Double-A and pitched well.
Did a nice season.
Yeah. So, like, who are there? Are there a couple of guys there that you have a particular, shine to, or represent something maybe the Royals are doing well?
So I think they are actually. Like Mason Barnett had a nice season. I like Noah Cameron a little bit too. Again, they don't really pick guys that throw particularly hard, especially out of the college ranks, which, fine, whatever. Sometimes that plays up in short bursts once they move to short bursts. Anthony Veneziano is another a name that got flagged for me by staff this year as well. And again, these guys, all guys that have had some success in the upper minors, have something resembling a bat missing pitch. Barnett's slider is probably the best of them, and like he's very much this kind of like polished college fourth starter type, but they also like need a few of those just to fill out the back of the rotation. Give yourself some kind of pitching depth, and like, look, there's a chance that somebody takes a little bit of a jump here. I got good reports on Hero Wyatt out of the draft. Who was anytime you can go for another 7-figure Connecticut prep arm, I guess you have to do it. But he's probably just going to be a fastball slider reliever, which again, for a 3rd round prep arm is fine. That's the kind of stuff you still need to actualize, and I'm not super confident they can, but he already throws harder than Mazzucato and has some feel for spin. So I think there's some stuff to like there. I kind of like Spencer Nivens, but again, I guess I was just, when working up video on this system, it was like shocking. I finally saw someone that could hit the ball hard and in the air at times. And he was that guy for me. Again, there's some in zone whiff issues, which is like for a guy that was in the Missouri Valley Conference, would be concerning to me to see how he does against pro velocity going forward. But again, at least there's like a little bit of upside there in the bat. And that's the thing for me with the Royals, like hitters, even the ones I like Javier Baz. We know so much more about what makes hitting work, I guess, than we have in recent years. We just have so much more data on it. Jarrett Seidler wrote about this in the annual for us this year as one of the fungo essays about how we've sort of had to change our approach. And look, I'm a dinosaur. I love to go to the park. I want to write my evaluations. I want to sit in the scout section. I want to see it, but I have to be realistic about where I was getting stuff wrong. And the 2 places I was getting stuff wrong on hitters, I think primarily were, guys with big power that just swung and missed at strikes too much, and guys that just couldn't consistently hit the ball hard in the air to the pull side. Isaac Paredes is look, I'm not going to beat myself up about Isaac Paredes because he's like a complete ridiculous outlier in how he's able to hit balls just high enough, just far enough, and just enough to the pull side, despite having well below average exit velocities at pretty much every percentile you would look at. But that's the kind of thing that was like eye-opening for me, where it's like, okay, what actually makes a good major league hitter? And it's 3 things, and they're all very scouty things too. We just have data for them now, right? It's pick which pitches you can hit hard. So it's basically identifying strikes versus balls, but even a little more granular than that. It's not missing them when you swing at them. And then it's when you hit them, hitting them hard. Like, it's, again, this sounds like baseball 101, but the thing is, we can actually see who's doing that really well. And I looked at some of these Royals guys, and almost none of them are hitting the ball hard. They're making a lot of contact. And the problem is when guys like do that, if you have elite barrel control, okay, great. You can be Jeff McNeil, you can be Luis Arias. Right. But, sometimes you're Michael Garcia, who makes a lot of contact, but it's in a fairly predictable spray pattern, and you just get against better defenses. You're not hitting the ball over outfielders' heads. Pitchers are going to challenge you, so you're not going to walk a ton. And these guys all kind of fall into this category. And like, look, you can be an okay major leaguer doing that, but it's a very quick drop off once the hits start falling in, because there's really no secondary skills there, and none of them can play shortstop. Even if they could play shortstop, Bobby Wood is there. And look, you draft shortstops because you just draft shortstops, and they're usually some more athletically talented players on the field as amateurs. So you just draft them and figure out the rest later. But they're not figuring out the rest later, I guess, is the long and the short of it here.
So if you took over, what would you change? What would be the first order of business?
I mean, I would have Cole Reagans talk to his guy at Tread, and I'm not joking, right? One of the ways you can short circuit this or shortcut this to an extent is the time it takes you to get up the personnel and the infrastructure is 3 to 4 years. But you can just send all your guys to Driveline or Tread or Cressy or Texas Baseball Fire. They're all over the place now, right? You can just hire their people, right? The Oakland A's, not a team known for spending big on front office talent, just hired away one of Wake Forest desk pitching lab people today. And I had a person in baseball tell me recently, like, Wake Forest is better pitching development than every major league team. So you can go and get the talent and the personnel too, and you make those connections when you send your players there, and like that you can try to jumpstart the process that way. Beyond that, it's like you got to get your amateur scouting, your pro scouting, your international scouting, your player development people, and your analytics people all in one room and be like, okay, the Royals are going to have certain limitations here, right? They just did give Bobby Witt a 9-figure extension, but they're not going to spend like the Dodgers. That's just not realistic. They might spend more than the Orioles. I saw they had the highest luxury tax number in the AL Central this year. That's wild to me. But again, you can get, something that the Orioles have found out. The Rays have certainly found out. The return on investment you get from development staff and like improvements you get internally are so much bigger than what you're paying these people. I mean, you should be paying them more, frankly. But even if you are paying, you give them all raises and do best in class salaries for your player development, your analytics, and et cetera. It's not even going to be as much as you paid Adam Frazier, frankly, over the course of a year. And that's where it's got to start. And look, Rob Manfred doesn't want teams going this direction. They talked about caps on non-uniform like ops personnel and things like that. Just cut wherever you can, I guess. But that's where it's got to be. You've got to spend money at the front here. And yeah, you've really got to look at the data. Like I can tell you, I looked at this data. It was very difficult for me to find a prospect when I was going through this that, hits the ball on average more than like 87 miles an hour. And I also could have told you that from watching them on video for the most part too. Like usually your eyes don't lie on these kind of things. And it just becomes, you need to figure out in the short term, what are we good at right now? What are our player development strengths? Because you look at Cleveland, they're not good at everything. They're good at very specific things. Baltimore is good at very specific things. The Dodgers are pretty much good at everything, but that took 10 years. So in the short term, where can we get some quick wins, right? So you're going to do the build out process, literally just send Frank Mazzucato, Shane Panzini, and Ben Caderna, and throw in Hero Wyatt and Blake Walters too, and send them to somewhere or have somebody come in and just, it's going to be, here's the thing though, it's going to be a huge culture shift for them. And I don't know that you're kind of asking a lot in some ways to make these kind of, remake the organization. I guess the Orioles did it. The Orioles basically did it in 5 years. And you need to get right ownership and high level buy-in too, because you're going to tell your owner. I had a conversation with Russell Carlton a number of years ago when he was writing about this kind of stuff and ops staff stuff for Baseball Prospectus. He did like a 5-part series on it. And he said to me and obviously Russell has consulted for a number of teams, that it is way easier for me to go into a room with the owner or the owner's representative or the GM and say, we can sign this reliever for $8 million. We can go sign Matt Moore, right? Here's what Matt Moore will do for us this year. And here's why it's worth $9 million. It's a lot harder to say, well, I want you to spend $9 million on a bunch of quants and pitching lab guys, and maybe we'll produce one Matt Moore internally out of it, and it'll be worth it. And you'll probably get more, honestly, if you're any good at it. But it's this kind of very hazy, ethereal, not tangible thing, right? You're talking about getting Frank Mazzucato 3 miles an hour more on his fastball and being able to locate it a little bit better. That's, not something I can project right now, but that's something that happens. It just doesn't happen to the Royals pitchers. It doesn't happen to the Royals pitchers a lot, right?
That's what player development is, right?
That's what player development is. And I think the Royals specifically, because of this sort of very scout heavy. Like Dayton Moore is a scout, right? It's a very scout heavy mentality. And look, I'm sympathetic. I was that person for a number of years, but you gotta, at a certain point, you gotta want to win, right? And you can't look at these processes and these outcomes and be like, we're doing everything right. Like you just can't, even within the limitations that you have. And you've got to be pretty, I think, and like people, I feel like people respect that. If you're like, okay, like people made fun of the Cardinals, right? At the trade deadline for John Mozeliak went said, we're kind of looking at strikeouts now. We didn't know strikeouts were this important. And it's kind of like it plays as a joke and kind of like, well, strikeouts are important. But, for the Cardinals, they've never really needed to have strikeout pitchers because their positioning and their defensive development was so good. And look, some of that is just, the game has continued to punish pitching that can't miss bats more and more, just people doing more and more damage on contact. And part of it's, you can't put Tommy Edman in short right field all the time either. So you don't get the advantage of, Tommy Edman being a 20-run defender through your little magical positioning thought. And that all plays into it. And look, you can look at the Royals in 2015 and 2016. This happened to them, right? They built a team, for that stadium. The main reason they beat the Mets that year, I think, in the World Series, like, look, anything happened in a 7-game series. And I'm not bitter as a Mets fan, but the reason they beat the Mets that year is because they were able to put velocity in play, right? They did not swing and miss, and enough good things happened. And they pretty much had the same team after that. And look, sometimes you just have a year, but that's when stuff started to shift, right? More strikeout pitching, more damage on contact.
Well, the ball probably changed.
The ball
right?
also
All
changed significantly
and the
too.
team
So they did not
adjust.
all of a sudden, Edison Volquez is giving up a few more home runs than he was previously, and Chris Young, like guys like that. And it becomes, the game changed from out from under them, and you've got to adjust quickly. And like the Cardinals are adjusting pretty quickly, but you've got to. I saw someone say, like, you can't worry about the culture when you lost 106 games, and fair enough. But, having a conversation on our Baseball Prospectus podcast, Five and Dive. And
I was going to say, sorry, what's interesting about what you're saying is that, we've talked about on the shows, one of the most interesting things that the Royals have done this winter is they've hired somebody from Tread.
Yeah.
And it's one person, okay, but like
it's a start. You got to start somewhere.
And it's hopeful. We hope that it is, while it's even one person, is just a symptom of a front office that realizes that they've fallen behind and that they have to go out, and it's going to be a lot faster to bring in people from other organizations than trying to develop that coaching ability from within.
Right. And it's got to be everything, and you got to get buy-in, and that's tough too, right? Because everybody wants to, like, look, ultimately, and I says, well, everybody wants to keep their job. Like, there's only 30 jobs. There's only 30 teams. If you're JJ Piccolo, like, it's really nice being the GM of a Major League Baseball team, right? That's what you've been working for your entire career. And you have this owner that you answer to who's trying to build a new stadium and all those things. And there's obviously, like any office, there's a lot of politics, and there's people that aren't going to want to change. Again, as a Mets fan, I've seen, 5 different front offices in the last 5 years. So you get the push and pull there, of all kinds and all viewpoints. But at a certain point, right, you've got to try something different. And I think there are some baby steps in that direction, right? And Bobby Witt is a foundational piece. I think what Cole Reagans has done is sustainable. I don't know if it'll be quite as good, over the course of the whole season as it was for the Royals in the second half, but they've kind of like made some interesting moves to me. I like the pickup of Nelson Velasquez. Again, he's like an extreme damage on contact guy. I don't know how sustainable that is, but they seem to be at least getting a little bit out of their comfort element. And look, they probably identified something with Cole Reagans that the Rangers didn't, or the Rangers didn't really care about. And like, look, maybe they just got lucky. That happens too. Cole Reagans has been a known prospect for a number of years. Maybe they're just going off an old pro scouting report or something. I don't know the answer to that. All of this stuff is always very post hoc, and you can kind of apply whatever filters you want to it afterwards. Like I mentioned Tony Gonsolin before, but Tony Gonsolin could have just been Tony Gonsolin. But clearly we know now he was not just Tony Gonsolin. There's an actual ethos there. specifically in the kind of pitcher types they go for, often guys that weren't pitching in college or didn't pitch much or were hurt or things like that. But again, it all comes back to you have to figure out what you're good at as an organization. You've got to get everyone able to identify that, whether they're doing it from an analytics point of view or a scouting point of view or a development point of view. And then you just start the long process, and it's a long process. The Orioles did not just pull Yennier Cano out of nowhere. There was a bunch of different things that went. You look even, what are we probably now 15 years on of the Rays being the Rays, probably even a little more than that now. And I've talked to people in their organization. I've talked to people outside the organization about them. One thing that people don't realize, the Rays probably have the best pro scouting department in Major League Baseball. It's like them or the Yankees. And you wouldn't know it. They don't brag about it per se, you do, but the way they integrate scouting and analytics is still, I think, so far ahead of whatever every other team is doing. But again, they've had even a 5-year head start over the Dodgers, a 10-year head start over the Orioles. And that brings you to the other problem too with doing this. Look, you have to do it. Like, you can't just keep doing what you're doing. The problem is you take the 5 years to catch up, and all the other teams are 5 years ahead of you now too. So you're always kind of, playing a little bit of a quicksand situation for you, where every step forward you take, like, again, you can short circuit it, you can tire it, you can always solve things with money in baseball. People don't like when I say that, but you can always solve things with money in baseball to an extent.
Even in the minors, you're talking.
Even in the minors, especially in the minors, honestly, which is why there's only 165 players as of next year, and why the teams want to limit. I mean, this goes back to
they know the
salaries.
owners
They
know that if they don't put a cap on it, that
you can say it. Jerry
that's where the gains
Reinsdorf
are gonna be
knows
made.
that if they just let the Dodgers do whatever they want, and like, it's not even the Dodgers, right? It's also the Rays, because the Rays have identified the ROI, and they're willing to make the I, is what it comes down to, whereas there are other smaller market teams that aren't. But it's silly. It's just, the Royals can't go out. I mean, they can, but the Royals can't go out and sign Blake Snell, or won't go out and sign Blake Snell. They weren't going to sign Shohei Ohtani, right? They can build a top class front office. That part is, I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm not going to say it's going to happen quickly, but they're always going to have the money for it. If they know what they're doing, and they know what they want to build, and they know who to hire. And look, a lot of it's tough, right? Because you kind of, oftentimes, I say this, the smartest, the best regarded president of baseball operations, GMs, whatever, are the way they are. Like, they're not like, do I think Andrew Friedman can fill out a 2080 scouting report? Yeah, probably. Do I think he can read a TrackMan printout? Absolutely. Is he running these queries? No, but he knows who to hire. That's right. The thing, is you got to know who to hire. The people that are doing the work, which is why personally, I always would prefer to talk to the analysts and the pro scouts, people on the front line, because they're the ones doing the actual work.
And to your point about that, I mean, John Sherman came as was a minority owner of the Guardians, and was presumably in on their processes. And so therefore should be an easy sell on here's where it is. He's also, I know what you said, that like, is it easier to justify spending $10 million on a reliever and saying, here's what he does at the big league level. Mm-hmm. But anyone who's in the money world, which John Sherman was, their life is driven by analytics. Mm-hmm. Right. That's what their business is. That's what everybody's business is up there. So that should be a very easy sell on him. If not, then shame on him, and we're doing, there's no hope. What I would ask you is how much, you mentioned that JJ Picollo has had some pretty good trades here. Cole Reagan's being one of them. More transactional, something that's been talked about. I mean, identifying talent in other systems and understanding when to give it. There are teams that will knowingly give you a player that they think is going to be better on down the road because they need a guy now. Yep. Is that the way to fast start, to jumpstart what it is?
Sure. I mean, you can
made, if they're not in contention, flip them all.
Yeah, you can certainly do that, and that's one way to do it. They don't really have so here's the problem with that nowadays, I think. And this was pointing back to sort of this year's trade deadline. The Mets were able to pivot very quickly because they were willing to eat a lot of money on Verlander and Scherzer, and even to an extent Tommy Pham and David Robertson. But like those players are not out there as much anymore. Like these like incoming or rentals, we'll call them, 2-month rentals or incoming free agents for like top talent, because Bobby Witt signing until he's mid-30s. Julio Rodriguez is signing into his mid-30s. Juan Soto's the best he's been traded twice. Manny Machado was traded, but it's very difficult. Like look, you can trade like as they did with Aroldis Chapman. They can, if Adam Frazier hits 300 for 4 months, they'll get something for him, right? But the kind of trades that actually bring back the top tier talent, it's Cole Reagan's in 2 years when he still has a ton of team control and is pitching like a number 2 starter. And those are the ones that sting too, right? So it's tough. It's very difficult to do these kind of like nationals. The White Sox did this with Chris Sale, obviously. These kind of like big rebuild sell-offs, and that's why some of the later 2010s and like early 2020s rebuilds haven't gone as well. Like when the Tigers tried to do this, they didn't really have a ton to trade. They had Justin Verlander, who had a no trade clause and was very willing to exercise it, and they got back Franklin Perez and Daz Cameron and somebody else. And Franklin Perez was a top 100 prospect, but he was a low minors pitcher that already had injury issues at that point. So they're not, again, it's difficult to do it that way. The way to do it is, I guess you call up Jerry DePoto and try to pick 2 guys out of his, because he's always open for business. But yeah, the way to rebuild it, there's no easy way to do a quick rebuild. Again, it would be trading Bobby Witt in 2 years, right? But you've already signed the extension, so there's no point in doing that. If Nick Lofton's good, again, the Royals are in a really weird spot here, because you look at the major league roster going into this season, and look, I saw reported the Marlins were asking for Vinny Pasquantino for Jesus Luzardo, right? Everybody's going to ask for Vinny Pasquantino. And I know why they're asking for Vinny Pasquantino. The Royals probably know why they're asking for Vinny Pasquantino, maybe not as granularly as I do. But, when they get a player like this, I saw someone comment they backed into Vinny Pasquantino, and they kind of did. Again, another kind of smaller college power bat. But again, I said I couldn't find anyone in the minors really hit the ball over 87 miles an hour. Hits the ball very hard and he hits it in the air. And yeah, he's a first baseman, but a bat's a bat at that point. And you need to be able to identify more Vinny Pasquantinos. Is the long and the short of it. It's much easier, honestly, it's easier to reboot quickly to the draft now if you know what you're doing. The problem is, you find out what you're good at or what you want to target, right? So the Mets, I know I'm turning this into a Mets podcast as I always do. The Mets did this with induced vertical break this year in the draft. So they took a lot of high IVV pitchers that maybe pitched for smaller colleges or pitched in relief or didn't perform particularly well despite having good IVV fastballs. And they just scooped them up starting like round 4, which is a thing you can do. The problem is when you only target that trait, any pitcher, everybody knows about induced vertical break now. So once you're doing that, you're just getting the pitchers that only have induced vertical break. You're not getting the ones that have other positive markers or good breaking balls or command or whatever, because they're going early. But at least it's an ethos, right? So the Royals are still taking very heavy bat to ball guys, and this goes down even into the. I'll be honest, I have not looked particularly closely into their 2024 IFA class, so I can't really speak to that. But Asbel Gonzalez, who was their top 2023 IFA, when I was doing this list, I pulled stuff on him because his top line numbers weren't bad, and it's the same thing. He's younger, so that you can project a little more power to come. But he makes pretty good contact. He doesn't chase a ton. Like it's actually really good swing decisions for his age, even considering the DSL. But if you just can't hit the ball hard nowadays, it's really tough for me to get behind you unless you really do it at a higher level for starters, or have those kind of Arias, McNeil kind of contact rates, or an extremely fly ball heavy pull batted ball profile. And again, it's one of these things. You got to do everything well now, and it's tough because the bridge between where the Royals are and where the Royals need to be. And again, I'm not trying to put them with the Orioles or the Dodgers, Yankees, Rays at this point, but just to be like as good as the Twins, who are, I don't know why I always use the Twins. Like they're the most average. Like they do some things well. They're very average at this, which isn't the worst place to be, I guess. But even to get to there, it's such a long process. And again, you hire 4 or 5 people. That's great. That's a good start. Again, they've got to hire their people and they've got to get the buy-in, and you've got to sit down on draft day or 4 months from now, 5 months from now, and really go in with a plan. Most good drafting teams now are heavily model based over amateur scouting, and like a lot of teams use scouting inputs or use the data to guide where they send their scouts. But it's tough, and that's a place you can catch up fairly quickly. Again, if you hire right and you spend right, but it's just a place where the Royals have clearly. I mean, I don't know what they do on that side, but from what I look at when I'm going through my process of evaluation and ranking, it's clearly they're just not particularly modern in that kind of evaluation and acquisition right now.
Okay.
Sorry, man. I got
no. We prefer the honest truth on this show, and God knows we dish out a lot of it ourselves. Why don't we finish up with maybe just like some one positive? Is there like one player, like one specific guy, like a low minors sleeper, just somebody most fans have never even heard of? Is there somebody you have a guy?
Yeah, let me go over my larger sheet here to see if I want to pull someone from there, or if I just want to go with. Okay, we'll go with Jared Dickey, who was there. I think it was their 11th round pick. I think it's slightly over slot.
Yep.
Out of
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
He was the over slot guy this past June.
Right? He's interesting. The Royals have moved him to left field already. He caught some in college, which would be a much better spot for his offensive skill set. But again, it's a super funky swing. So I love like the weird aesthetic stuff that just kind of works. So I'm always going to be pull for that guy and be a little more willing to do it. I think I literally wrote in his blurb that he has this shouldn't work, but it does vibes, and compared him to a wrong foot bowler. If you've ever seen someone bowl off the wrong foot, but that's kind of what it looks like when he swings, but it just kind of works. It could be like a really, really poor man's Chase DeLauder, maybe.
Okay.
I would like them to try him a catcher. He was not particularly good when I watched him, but again, teachable skill. I think he's played some other spots as well at Tennessee, but like he had a pretty good pro debut. I kind of believe in the bat a little bit. It's just he's going to be a left fielder. Well, first of all, he's got a lot of competition right now in this system, given who they're playing at left field. But I don't know if the actual power will carry the position.
Okay, that's our sleeper. That's our silver lining. A guy who might need a position change.
I know this is a huge downer. I actually kind of like. This is gonna fly in the face of the last hour. I actually kind of like this system. Again, I don't think it's good, but it's got like I don't know something about it. It's like very interesting to write about in a way that most bad systems aren't, because I find it just kind of fascinating the player types they go for, because nobody does this, right? If I'm writing the Orioles, I'm writing 14 guys that all hit the ball in the air hard, pull side, like 92 average exit velocity, 111 max, chase 24% of the time. They're all the same player. They're usually a corner bat, except for like Jackson Holiday and Samuel Basallo. It just gets boring to be right. Well, this is what the Orioles do. They're really good at it. At least here, it's kind of like, it's like fun. I can at least have a little fun with the write-ups because they're at least something different. I guess
Jeffrey,
a little bit of
you
variety.
just described the last 25 to 30 years of my life as a Royals fan. As a writer,
it's great.
The organization's been a gold mine for my entire career. As a fan, not the same. So
yeah, it's been rough. Well, Jeffrey, we kind of knew what we were going to get.
Yeah.
Right, and we appreciate you shooting us straight. And hopefully, I don't know, hopefully there's some diamonds in the rough, and hopefully we see a new approach in this upcoming draft. And, they continue to be transactional and bringing in new talent. And the international side's got to get better. I mean, that's the one thing that's just been an absolute zero for this franchise. And you can't live that way. So, Jeffrey, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Baseball Prospectus, please go check it out. Jeffrey's great work is there. He's got his prospect list up. You can get it. The subscription is not that expensive, by the way. It's totally worth it. We really appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll talk to you again after things brighten up a little bit, right?
Sounds good.
All right. There it is. Talking a little baseball right there. Rany, any last words when it comes to the prospect side of things?
I mean, like you said, it's nothing we didn't already suspect. It was really nice to hear it from somebody who obviously is really in the weeds on this stuff in terms of the player development, like talking about the type, the Royals having a type. And I mean, he's absolutely right. When you look at, Nick Lofton is like, this, to me, like the best case scenario for what these kind of like high contact, medium power, positional versatility. I mean, I think Nick Lofton will be a decent player, but then you look at like Peyton Wilson, he mentioned, who's in their top 10, Caden Wallace, who was the second round pick and is in their top 10. And these are guys who like, they might be an average player if everything breaks right, but like the star talent isn't really there. The Royals just have not focused on that. And I think ultimately, bringing in we've talked about bringing in guys to develop better players, or develop the players better, but the scouting director change and bringing in Brian Bridges, identifying different kinds of players. I think the Royals need to get away from the type of hitter that they've been going after in the draft for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think they've got to change what it is they're looking for. They got to change the plan, to quote Jeffrey said. One thing real quick, the Royals going to have a press conference. If you're catching us via the podcast, we usually stream live on a Sunday, but with it being Super Bowl Sunday, we waited till Monday. It's Monday night as we record here. 10 p.m. Central on a Sunday is when we usually stream. The Royals are going to have a press conference tomorrow at 2:30. They're going to announce the location of their stadium. By all indications, in fact, I think Sam McDowell has already reported that it's going to be the what they're calling the Crossroads district, which is basically where the old Star building was, which is on the south side of the Loop. There is a $200 million plan to cover the south part of the Loop and turn it into a green space, amongst other things. And this would connect that and would also, with that covering, make it easy to access the Power and Light District, and would presumably, based on the direction that they would have the ballpark going, give somewhat of a downtown view over left field, right? That's what we think we're going to hear. Are you excited?
I mean, yeah, I guess, given if you're going to have a stadium, and given that I don't know the geography of Kansas City as well as most of the people listening to this probably, but if you were going to move away from the Truman Sports Complex, this, by all accounts, seems like the general location you wanted to be at. And all the flirtations with North Kansas City and, going across the state line, like it just seemed like it, whether that was all a diversion or all just using the leverage to get what they wanted. Ultimately, it's almost like it kind of reminds me of the Bobby Witt contract. It's like it took way too long to get to the obvious solution. But if they actually got there, then I think this is probably the best thing for for the organization, and for the fans. I think it's a good place to put it.
And I think if you're going to ask people to vote, you got to tell them where you're going to build something.
Well, yeah, that goes without saying. At least they knew they had this deadline, both for the Bobby Witt contract and for, giving details about the stadium.
We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, with free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you focus on your business, no matter what it is you need with your parking lot. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Tell them you heard about them right here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.